is July the 8th, 2025, the day after the Sabasaba protests, during which the death toll has continued to rise. Tonight on The Explainer, our bulletin is chock-full of stories regarding the aftermath of the deadly Sabasaba Day of Commemoration.
Jana tulikuwa kwa nyumba na mtoto wangu muda wa 6:20 hapo, na ndio tukasikia kitu imelia na sauti kubwa sana tukiwa kwa nyumba kama tumekaa chini.
12-year-old girl in Kiambu among more than 30 people killed during Sabasaba protests on Monday.
Ukiongeza hiyo gharama utapata zinakuja karibu kitu 6 million hizo gari mbili na hii kazi yangu.
Millions down the drain. Traders counting losses following wanton destruction of property and looting during Sabasaba protests.
It is also incumbent upon the police to distinguish between peaceful demonstrators and criminal elements, those who infiltrate protests to incite violence and loot.
Chief Justice Martha Karua condemns killings and destruction of property as UN Human Rights calls for probe.
The healthcare workers took safety. They had to camouflage as patients, so they had to put on patients' gown so that now at least they could not really get to know who are the health workers working here.
How goons raided, vandalized medical equipment and harassed staff and patients at Kitengela Sub-County Hospital. And on the program tonight, we're trying to look forward and to see where the solutions lie in what might seem like a deadlock in the country. And for that, we're speaking with Martha Karua, who's the party leader of the People's Liberation Party. Her take on the Sabasaba Day commemorations, everything that happened, the death toll, the destruction of property, and where do we go from here? Martha Karua will be live here on The Explainer tonight, which starts right now.
Live from Citizen TV, this is The Explainer with Yvonne Okwara.
Joki Shege is our sign language interpreter. Tonight, we begin with the rising death toll from Monday's Sabasaba protests. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights confirms that 31 people have died amidst the unrest. Among the victims is a 12-year-old girl from Dumberi, Kiambu County, who was fatally struck by gunfire while watching television with her mother nearly 2 kilometers away from the main protest routes. Brenda Wanga reports on the devastated family's demand for justice.
It takes every ounce of strength for Lucy to put one foot in front of the other. Her world came crashing down Monday evening, right inside the safety of her home. Tragedy came knocking as she and her daughter were basking in the comfort of their home.
Jana tulikuwa kwa nyumba na mtoto wangu muda wa 6:20 hapo, na ndio tukasikia kitu imelia na sauti kubwa sana tukiwa kwa nyumba kama tumekaa chini.
That loud noise would prove to be devastating for this family in ways they couldn't have imagined. The protests, ongoing about 2 kilometers from their house, had reached them in a cruel, brutal and devastating manner. A stray bullet had pierced the iron sheet roofed house and struck Bridget.
Kumwangalia kwa mkono nikaona akona damu. Wakati niliona akona damu, tulidhani ni kitu imemkata kama ni kitu imepasuka. Wakati nilimshika mkono kuangalia damu imetoka wapi, ndio mtoto wangu akaanguka chini. Na kumwangalia nikaona akona shimo kwa kichwa, ndio nikapiga duru.
The little girl did not stand a chance even as he was rushed to the nearby St. Bridget's Hospital. The family's hope for her survival extinguished, leaving them with desperate pleas for justice for their little girl who paid the ultimate price for a battle she was not involved in.
Ningetaka pia kuuliza haki ya mtoto wangu nitaipata aje? na hata kama nitapata haki, watarudisha mtoto wangu hai tena, hawatamrudisha ya kweli.
Hakuna mwenye amekuja kututembelea wala kutupa lambirambi.
The police visited the home to collect evidence as they begin to investigate the circumstances that led to the killing of the little girl. She is one of 31 people from across different parts of the country who had their lives cut short through excessive police force as the security apparatus quelled protests to mark the 35th Sabasaba anniversary. Kiambu County suffered the most casualties with 6 deaths, including that of 12-year-old Bridget. 5 deaths were recorded in the capital Nairobi, 4 in Murang'a, 3 in Ngong, 2 in Kiserian and Naivasha respectively, and 1 each in Juja, Thika, Kitengela, Kerugoya and Embu, amongst other areas. Brenda Wanga, Citizen TV.
Tens of families are in mourning following the sudden and brutal deaths of their loved ones, victims of what appears to be yet another brazen and unjustified use of force by suspected security agencies. According to relatives, most of those shot dead were not part of the demonstrations, highlighting a disturbing pattern: the violent intrusion into residential areas, leaving innocent Kenyans caught in the crossfire. Laura Otieno now documents the anguish of families grappling with loss and questioning a government whose primary duty is to protect life.
A heavy cloud of grief hung over the Kiambu Level 5 hospital morgue on Tuesday as distraught families gathered to mourn 6 lives lost to gunshot wounds during the Sabasaba protests. The anguish was palpable, relatives struggling to come to terms with the brutal and sudden loss that had shattered their homes. Among them was Frida Kawera, inconsolable over the death of her 23-year-old son, Dennis Mwangi, who was shot in the back while washing clothes just outside their home in Kiambu. Hers is a story echoed by other grieving families, all insisting their loved ones were not part of the protests.
Kama mtoto wangu alikufa nini? Alikuwa tu ameketi kwa nyumba. Just kusimama tu kuziangalilia hivyo mtoto wangu anashutiwa. Nao maserikali wanaenda tu na wanaenda tu hivi hata waangalie kwenye wanashuti.
What transpired? Ndio amshoot na ni kwa street. KDG ya White ambao sijui inakuanga station ya Makongeni na mekuanga wapi, hiyo ndio ilikuwa ilimshoot. Sasa mwenye alikuwa kwa hiyo DG mwenye alimshoot ndio mimi naweza taka tujue ni nani.
A similar tragedy unfolded in Kirinyaga County where 21-year-old Peter Masharia also fell to a police bullet. He was walking to the shop with his cousin. An ordinary errand that turned fatal. Unaware he was taking the final steps of his life, Peter never made it back home.
Hao watu wakati walianza hiyo commotion yao, watu wakirudi kupotea na huku, huyo madam Junior alikuwa na buduki yenye hizi zingine zilikuwa zinaonekana ni za tear gas. Yake ndo ilikuwa inaonekana ndo ilitumika hiyo kazi.
In Embu, another family is grieving, that of 29-year-old Anita Kendi. She had just left the hospital and was on her way home when she encountered protesters. As police opened fire in pursuit of the crowd, Anita was caught in the chaos and shot while trying to seek shelter from the gunfire.
Tuko tumesimama hivi nikamwambia tuondoke hapa tusonge hivi eti naenda kugeuka hii side nyingine nikiwa nafikiria amenifuata nikasikia watu wakisema umeua kuangalia ni sister yangu wako chini.
Human rights groups have accused the government of sanctioning the use of excessive force, including allegations that vehicles seen during the chaos were ferrying members of the dreaded killer squads, according to eyewitness accounts.
Kenya is not a police state. This government must understand that we are beyond, being coerced. We are beyond being silenced. We will continue to air our voices.
Laura Otieno, Citizen TV.
Chief Justice Martha Karua has called on the police to employ professionalism and exercise restraint while dealing with protesters. The CJ adding that the security agencies should distinguish between peaceful demonstrators and criminal elements. This comes as Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki blamed the chaotic spate of demos witnessed in the country to youth unemployment.
In her address hours after the chaotic 35th Sabasaba demonstrations, Chief Justice Martha Karua urged the police to adhere to their code of conduct, including separating goons from genuine protesters.
It is also incumbent upon the police to distinguish between peaceful demonstrators and criminal elements, those who infiltrate protests to incite violence and root.
Speaking while presiding over the swearing-in of new commissioners to the National Police Service Commission in Nairobi, Karua called on the police to exercise restraint while carrying out their duties. This comes as Deputy President Professor Kithure Kindiki attributed the violent demos to youth unemployment in the country.
Among the number of unemployed people we have, over 60% are youth. And this is what drives young people into crime and drugs and into a general state of hopelessness and despair.
Kindiki was speaking during the official opening of the Huawei Lift Jobs Fair 2025 at the University of Nairobi.
We want justice! We want justice!
This as the former Chief Justice David Maraga also weighed in the matter, calling out the Kenya Kwanza government for weaponizing the police, accusing them of using brute force against the people. Maraga proposing 4 points to resolve the existing political quagmire, including listening to the youth who have paid the ultimate price in calling for change, holding leaders of failed institutions accountable, arraign killers of the protesters for their excesses, and finally, hold the president accountable for gross violation of the Constitution. The international community also added its voice on the deadly protests, with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, calling for investigation into the excessive use of force and alleged human rights violations during the protests. Emmanuel Toh, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
Now, opposition leaders have castigated the use of police force against protesters. The leaders accuse the government of violating human rights and called on Kenyans to stand firm and defend their constitution. Here's Stephen Leto with that report.
The united opposition came out guns blazing to condemn the killings witnessed on Monday during the Sabasaba Day protest witnessed in various parts of the country. The opposition claims that the government has thrown the constitution to the wind.
The killings are neither accidental nor isolated. They are targeted, often at young protesters and activists.
The leaders further claim that a group of armed goons are enjoying police protection.
The militia are coordinated, wearing civilian clothes but operating with police protection. The use of excessive force is sanctioned at the highest levels, including public statements by cabinet secretaries and high-ranking police officials. There is no accountability, only denials, cover-ups, and state propaganda.
The opposition, who include former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, called on Kenyans to stand up and defend their rights against what they termed as a sustained police brutality.
This regime is now hostile. It cannot be reasoned with. It must be resisted. We will not rest. We will not retreat. We will not surrender until every drop of innocent blood is accounted for.
Allow us not to take any question kindly. Thank you so much.
Stephen Leto, Citizen TV.
Well, Martha Karua, the party leader of the People's Liberation Party, will be live here with me on The Explainer in just a few moments. And we'll talk about what happens next and where do we go as a country, considering all the events that have taken place in the country over the last few weeks and indeed the last year. Let's carry on with our stories on the aftermath of the Sabasaba Day. At least 5 families in Ngong and Kiserian are in mourning following Monday's deadly Sabasaba protests. A 19-year-old boda boda operator from Kiserian was among the 5 men shot dead as police officers clashed with protesters in an operation that stretched well past 9 p.m. The families insist their loved ones were innocent. Their lives ended by what they describe as unjustified police force. We will be getting to that story in just a moment from now, but let's update you on the events that took place in Kitengela, where clinical officers and medical laboratory officers under the Health Union Caucus are threatening to withdraw their services nationwide, citing growing safety concerns during protests. Now, this follows horrifying scenes at the Kitengela Sub-County Hospital on Monday, where a rowdy mob stormed the facility, harassed medics, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The Health Union Caucus is now demanding round-the-clock protection for all healthcare facilities by armed police. Here's Emily Chebet.
These were scenes at Kitengela Sub-County Hospital. Blood-stained floors, gloves and medical supplies scattered, window panes shattered as the hospital turned into a battleground. Ironically, the first person to break a window with his fist suffered deep cuts. He was given first aid inside the same facility he helped to vandalize.
My members, who are medical laboratory officers, were cross-matching blood for him because he had bled so much and he had to be transfused. As they were doing that, the goons attacked the lab first. There's a broken window there.
You know, it's very insensible. It is detestable and very unfortunate that any Kenyan would want to harm the people that they are going to run to so that their life can be saved. We are blaming the government because we have called on them several times.
The rowdy youth who had accompanied a victim of the Sabasaba protest forced their way into the facility, turned violent, ransacking the facility. They harassed healthcare workers, patients, endangering the lives of the most vulnerable, including children and pregnant women. The Health Union Caucus is now demanding answers as to why hospitals across the country remain exposed.
The healthcare workers took safety. They had to camouflage as patients, so they had to put on patients' gown so that now at least they could not really get to know who are the health workers working here. And after that, now the police were informed and the administration took action.
Any time that we are having such demonstrations, that we are saying that the environment is not conducive and not secure, we shall be invoking Section 14 of the OSH Act. We will be withdrawing our health workers from those facilities until their safety is guaranteed.
Government must take measures to provide security in all facilities where services must be given, because we are neutral. We are not pro anyone. We are there to offer services to any person who will be injured during this demo, or rather the demo that will be coming, or even any police, because we don't choose who to give services.
The union has also condemned police barricades, which they say restricted access to critical health services in various parts of the country during the protests. Emily Chebet, Citizen TV.
All right, let's take you back to Ngong and Kiserian now, where at least 5 families are in mourning following the Monday deadly Sabasaba protests. A 19-year-old border operator from Kiserian was among the 5 men shot dead as police officers clashed with protesters in an operation that stretched well past 9 p.m. The families insist their loved ones were innocent, their lives ended by what they describe as unjustified police force, adding to the rising toll of victims of alleged police excesses. Gatete Njoroge reports.
At the Bulbul Muslim Cemetery, a somber crowd of family, friends and local leaders gathered to lay 27-year-old Paul Isamboro to rest, one of the latest victims of the Sabasaba protests. Boro's life was cut short by a moment of curiosity. He had stepped out of his house to catch a glimpse of the protests unfolding nearby as police and demonstrators clashed in running battles. Then came the fatal shot. A single bullet to the head, and just like that, Mboro became another grim statistic in the growing list of victims of police excesses. Left behind is an expectant widow, still reeling from the shock only months after the couple had settled into their new life together.
Singetarajia ati wanaweza kufikia ati mahali hata kushikana na watoto kama hawa waanze kuua bure. Ni makosa. Mimi ni kitu naweza sema mambo irekebike tu, iangaliwe.
Haya ambayo yaendelea sasa hivi nchini Kenya, yeye aweza akayaingilia kati na akayarekebisha ili maafa yasiweze kupatikaniwa zaidi. Hicho tu ndicho ambacho tumuomba rais aingilie kati, atengeneze pale ambapo yaona pameharibika.
Just about 200 meters from where Paul Mboro was shot, another young man lay on the ground, writhing in pain. He too had been shot, but never saw where the bullet came from or who pulled the trigger. He was rushed to Kenyatta National Hospital, where he remains admitted, recovering from yet another incident tied to the chaos of that day. A gloomy sky hangs over the Ngong Sub-County Hospital morgue. Mothers overwhelmed with grief are comforted by friends and relatives as they mourn the sudden loss of their sons. Their sons' young lives cut short in their prime, on a day when simply being in the street was treated like a crime. It all began when a group of protesters marched toward Ngong police station. Moments later, gunshots pierced the air. In the chaos, 2 lives were lost. Jeremiah Oscar and Joseph Kagiri, both gunned down in Ngong town.
Ametoka Ngaranji sasa anaelekea nyumbani. Si nyumbani Mathare si lazima upitie hapa. Na si alipitia hii njia hili sasa apitie njia mzuri. Badala ya kupitia ile sasa choro. Sasa ndio aliatiriwa zitasi pale na mtu alikuwa juu ya ngorofa sniper. Hapo ndio alichukuliwa risasi ya shingo.
For Gladys Mudhoni, the pain of losing the first fruit of her womb is unbearable. Her son Joseph Kagiri, a welder based in Kiserian, had come home to visit his parents. But that visit ended in tragedy when he was shot dead during the protests in Ngong town.
Hakuwa mmoja wa waandamanaji kwa sababu sijaisikia na sijaimsikia na kitu kama hiyo ya kwenda kuandamana. Alitoka kazini kwake akikuja ongea na baba yake. Sasa ndio mtoto wangu amekufa.
12 kilometers away in Kiserian, another family is still struggling to come to terms with devastating news. 19-year-old Moses Tobiko, a boda operator, was on his way home when he was fatally shot around 9 p.m. by officers still engaging in running battles with protesters.
Amemsuit. Amekufa nini? Hata si hata tafadhali mimi wageniua. Mimi nimemaliza maisha kwa sababu nimewalea.
At the shop that bore the brunt of the looting, the scene tells its own story. Dried blood stains mark the spot, a grim reminder of the force used to confront the chaos. The killing of Moses Tobiko and 3 others in Ngong has raised concerns over continued use of force by police officers in discharging their mandate, with the families demanding for justice. Gatete Njoroge, Citizen TV, Kiserian, Kajiado County.
Traders whose businesses were looted and destroyed are counting losses worth hundreds of millions of shillings in the aftermath of the Sabasaba protests. Farmers whose agricultural perishable produce got spoiled because transport to and from major cities and towns was paralyzed say they have been rendered vulnerable with no capital to reinvest in their businesses. Seth Alale highlights the looting and destruction that marred the Sabasaba demonstrations in Nairobi and Nakuru.
The aftermath of the looting and destruction in Shaurimoyo, Kamukunji constituency during the Sabasaba protests. Jamlek Njogu, a wholesaler trader who stocks and supplies metallic hardware, was among those hardest hit after his stores were broken into and property stolen.
So kwa saa hii nimeachwa hivyo, nimeibiwa kila kitu, sina gari, sina mali, so niko tu hivyo na sina chochote kwa saa hii, na sina mahali ya kuelekea.
It did not end there. The goons also torched his 2 lorries that he uses to distribute supplies to customers.
Ukiongeza hiyo gharama, utapata zinakuja karibu kitu 6 million hizo gari mbili na hii kazi yangu.
Njogu's immediate neighbors, who are also wholesale traders in Shauri Moyo, were not spared either.
Hapa tulikuwa tumeka hizi vitu trolleys, vitu za hardware, tulikuwa na hii side na hapa.
Kama vile mnavyoona hapa duka vile imevunjwa, tulikuwa na mali ya zaidi ya 1200.
Saduku zenye zimemalizika zote zikaenda, ambaye imegharamia karibu 1800.
At the nearby Marikiti market, farmers who had their agricultural produce stuck in the highways after transport was paralyzed following police roadblocks in major cities and towns are staring at losses.
Waweze kuja na mpango muafaka na ili waweze kufaidi ama kurudisha wale ambao ndio waweze kuregea katika biashara zao.
Sentiments shared by transport operators whose public service vehicles were stalled at various locations after transport was paralyzed.
Kwa sababu ilibidi tuwashushe sehemu ambazo hazistahili ama sehemu ambazo hatujaziorodhesha.
In Nakuru, business owners of West End and Stage Mart were among those severely affected by the looting and destruction of property worth millions of shillings.
Mara ya kwanza wakaja wakasukuma wale askari wakaenda, tena askari wakakuja tena wakasukuma wakaenda.
Many traders say they took loan facilities in order to set up businesses which they relied upon in order to cushion them against the high cost of living. But all that is now losses. They're now wondering where to even start from. Seth Olale, Citizen TV, Kamukunji, Nairobi County.
As the dust settles on the violent protests that rocked Sabasaba Day, businesses in several major towns are left nursing deep scars from the Monday, July 7th protests, with losses running into millions of shillings. Business owners are warning that if the government fails to control the escalating violence, they will be forced to take matters into their own hands to safeguard their investments. Our reporter Kamau Mwangi now takes stock of the widespread destruction affecting both large and small enterprises.
Broken into, looted or burnt to the ground. This was a grim reality facing numerous businesses across the country as the dust settled on a chaotic Monday meant to mark Sabasaba Day. In Kirinyaga, businessman Jerome Kombozi, the proprietor of Nice Digital City in Moya, is counting losses estimated at over 50 million shillings. His enterprise was stormed by a group of marauding youths who left behind a trail of destruction. It could have been far worse, but a single phone call brought in GSU reinforcements just in time to prevent further damage.
Kama sio Inspector General wa polisi, Nice Digital City haingekuweko. Saa hii tunaongea yote properties are over 2 billion. Singekuwa ash, singekuwa njivu.
In Meru County, this is all that remains of Maguna supermarket, reduced to debris after a wave of destruction swept through the town. It was one of the 3 major businesses targeted in the chaos. Nearby, Beipoa supermarket also fell victim, with protesters looting everything in sight. Not far off, the 7-Eleven club located close to the 2 enterprises was similarly ransacked, leaving a trail of losses and shattered livelihoods.
Those are criminals, those are goons. Na tukitaka kujenga Meru, hatuwezi kucheka na watu ambao wanaharibu. Mtu anabeba TV ya 60 feet inch na labda hata hana mahali ya kuiweka.
Violence will never deliver what you are seeking. It will only deepen the wounds of poverty and delay the progress we all deserve.
In Nyeri, County Commissioner Ronald Mwiwawi says a total of 11 businesses were broken into and looted during the unrest. Among them was this meat joint in Nyeri Town CBD. Its proprietor Charles Moreithi says the looters made away with meat from 3 cows, electronics and cash, losses he estimates to be worth over 1 million Kenya shillings.
We believed that the government will take care of us.
and therefore, and we close the business just a precaution, so that. But when they are broken into, we are left. We don't know what to do and who to turn to.
In Machakos County, Julius Kiilu is a man at a loss. His gas business, nurtured over 33 years, was reduced to ashes in minutes after protesters set fire to his truck carrying gas cylinders, frustrated when they were unable to gain entry to his premises.
Wakatoa kioo ikaanguka hapa kwa barabara ikavunjika. Sasa ndio wakarudi ndani wakatupa tairi ndani ikiwa na moto. Na hapa Machakos mimi nimezaliwa hapa na nimefanyia biashara hapa. Kwa hivyo ninaweza kusema hawa watu wenye walifanya hayo mambo si watu wa hapa Machakos na si Gen Z.
Destruction and looting of businesses were also reported in Murang'a County, while Embu remained a ghost town for the second consecutive day. Business activities were severely disrupted as police and protesters engaged in running battles in the outskirts of the town. Kamau Mwangi, Citizen TV.
Let's take our first short break here on the program tonight, but Martha Karua is here and she will be coming right after this break to talk about the state of liberty in the country. Where do we go from here? How do we solve the deadlock that exists in this country? Following the protests that were led by Gen Z in June 2024 to date. She'll be live with me in studio in just a few minutes, so stay with us here on The Explainer. Nation following yesterday's events. Thank you so much for making time for us.
And thank you for having me.
Yeah. Let's start by just getting your reaction from the events that we saw. I mean, there's been quite a bit that's happened from June 25th, but your immediate reaction to the day that was yesterday, Sabasaba.
It's shock, frustration, anger to see continued trend of killing innocent protesters, peaceful protesters, destroying businesses. And it's apparent that it's state-sponsored goons who are destroying the businesses. The reports we are getting, say from Kirinyaga, from Meru, from elsewhere, that the people who destroyed the businesses appear to have been dropped there. Yes, they may have been joined by local people in looting, especially in Mwea, but the trigger was people imported to do specifically that. Targeting of businesses in Nairobi, in other places, and indiscriminate killing of people. I saw a body, what appeared to be a body, being dragged on the tarmac by police. You don't just kill people, you disrespect the dead. It is something we have not seen, unprecedented. And we can only shudder that this rogue regime continues to butcher Kenyans with impunity.
Mm. This was meant to be the 35th commemoration of Sabasaba. You were there during that time. I wonder what was your plan, to commemorate this day, considering you played a central role in the Sabasaba movement that got us to multi-party democracy.
It's a celebration of our freedom and demand that the rights that are guaranteed in our constitution be respected. One of them being the right to picket, which we have seen under this rogue regime being completely disregarded. They are actually trying to intimidate and stop people from expressing themselves. From Gen Zs who express themselves online, from cartoonists, from people who just want to exercise their freedom, disagreeing with the regime and making jokes about them, being abducted, tortured, turning up dead. So it is a celebration of our freedom and a reminder that we must keep fighting for it. We really must fight and refuse to be bottled and returned to the dark days of yesterday.
Yeah, how do you think we should commemorate this day going forward? Because it's always been, sometimes passes quietly. Yeah. Obviously after June 2024, and now, the day has perhaps gotten back to the front of our memories. But how would you propose we we commemorate a day like this in this country?
I think it should be a day to celebrate the freedoms we have gained so far. One way is coming out and expressing ourselves. And Gen Z have shown that Kenyans can have large-scale demonstrations that are peaceful. And we remember, even in 2024, the protests were beautiful. They were like a carnival, coming out, a show of patriotism, waving flags, caring for one another. Violence and death was introduced by the state. Snipers shooting peaceful young protesters. And from then on, what we have seen is like vengeance from the regime. You dare express yourself, we will crush you, we will kill you, we will desecrate the very freedoms that are protected in the Constitution. It is totally unacceptable. And to Kenyans, I say, don't lose hope. We really must fight. Tukiwachilia hata dakika moja, we are going to be bottled up and returned to where we came from. We must fight for our freedoms, and we must refuse to be intimidated.
Okay. Yeah. Martha Karua, party leader of the People's Liberation Party, please stay with us here as we continue to talk about this day, and indeed, most importantly, what lies ahead and where do we move from here? Because, like we're saying, we seem to be deadlocked. There is no compromise on either side. So what is the way forward? And indeed, there have been some proposals, and we'd like to hear what your proposals are as well in terms of moving the country forward from the stalemate we seem to find ourselves in. We continue here on The Explainer with our coverage of the aftermath of the Sabasaba protest that turned deadly. Now, Citizen TV has established that a killer squad seen moving through volatile areas on Sabasaba Day, masked, heavily armed and firing indiscriminately, is a covert team of elite operatives drawn from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations, DCI, the Anti-Terror Police Unit, ATPU, and the Intelligence Service. A squad that has left a chilling trail of death wherever it was deployed is seemingly untouchable and acting on high-level orders. But who are the shadowy figures behind this lethal force, and who is commanding them? Melita Oletenges reports.
More disturbing footage continues to emerge. Videos showing these operatives shooting without provocation, even aiming into apartment buildings where civilians try to document their actions. These masked, militarized forces moved like ghosts, answerable to no visible command, but coordinated with precision and seemingly with impunity. The Police Reforms Working Group has condemned the deployment, warning that it violates court rulings and undermines constitutional rights. The group states that heavily armed police with military-grade weapons were deployed in violation of court orders, using masks and unmarked vehicles to conceal their identities. Key police bosses now under public and legal scrutiny in the wake of the deaths recorded include Adamson Bungei, the Director of Operations National Police Service, Mohamed Amin, the Director of DCI, Said Kiprotich, Chief of the Anti-Terrorism Police Unit, and Nurdin Haji, the Director of National Intelligence Service. Ironically, a similar squad was once condemned by President William Ruto himself.
Mimi nimeamurisha juzi ivunjwe ile ilikuwa inaitwa special sijui nini ya police ambayo ilikuwa inaua wa Kenya kiholela. Usalama ilikuwa imezoroteka. Watu wanapatikana kule kwa sijui Rivayala, sijui watu wanapatikana huko wameuliwa kiholela.
But their recent actions suggest a chilling comeback, just days after a now retracted but suspicious shoot-to-kill remark by the Interior Cabinet Secretary.
Mwenye anasumbua mawe polisi anataka kuua polisi ati atakuja kubembelezwa. Wanafikiria bunduki ni mandazi.
With over 20 recorded deaths from the Sabasaba protests, Questions are mounting on whether this is national security or a sanctioned extermination of those with dissenting voices, with the opposition having previously sounded an alarm.
A special squad of 101 officers that was set up and trained highly on abductions, torture and killings and cover-up.
In some cases, bullets have even penetrated rooftops and apartment ceilings, threatening Kenyans in the supposed safety of their homes. This is the new face of the Grim Reaper in Kenya's protests, masked, armed and sweeping through volatile zones with one mission: to shoot, to kill. And these aren't terrorists, they are unarmed youth falling to live bullets in broad daylight. While high-level operations may be classified, the enemy in this case isn't firing back. Is this security enforcement or sanctioned slaughter? Who are the faces behind the masks? Who gave the shoot-to-kill orders? Who formed these killer squads? And how will men who murder in the shadows be brought to book? In April, a court ruled that all police officers deployed to demonstrations must be in uniform and easily identifiable. Yet this ruling too has been ignored, just like the rights of the citizens now lying dead. Melita Oletenges, Citizen TV.
Manyata Member of Parliament Gitonga Mukunji will spend the night at the Muthaiga police station pending a court ruling on bail application and a prosecution application to detain him for a further 10 days. Mukunji was arraigned in Kahawa on allegations linking him to incitement and orchestrating violence during the Sabasaba protests. Alongside him were several other suspects arrested in connection with the June 25 demonstrations, including DCP party officials Peter Kawanjiro and Wanjiko Thiga. More than 195 suspects were arraigned in various parts of the country on charges related to Monday's Sabasaba protests. Here we have Ode Francis with the details.
Mukunji is accused of being a prime instigator in the Sabasaba protest, with police linking him to coordinated criminal activity. His arrest in Juja raised eyebrows. He was reportedly found in an unregistered luxury vehicle and accused of distributing cash to youth allegedly tasked with sparking violence.
For Manyata constituency in Ebu County.
The prosecution sought a 10-day detention window to allow further investigations, with defense lawyers pushing back and challenging the basis of the extended custody.
Is to request a limitation of the rights to liberty.
Not just to say the whole country are watching clearly this political persecution. So it cannot be any other thing. We cannot call it by any other name.
I will deliver a ruling on the application by the council for the respondents tomorrow at 11 a.m.
DCP party leaders Peter Kawanjiro and Wanjiko Thiga were arraigned on terrorism-related charges and accused of mobilizing youth to incite violence in Kikuyu and Kiambu.
Clear group affiliation.
Magistrate Gideon Kiage ordered their detention until 10th July, pending further directions. 25 suspects linked to the burning of government offices in Kikuyu also appeared. Their case, also with those of 10 others arrested in Matu, Machakos County, are set for mention on July 10th, when the court will determine whether to proceed with charges or grant bail. In Machakos, 5 minors are among 68 people who will be held for 10 days as police finalize investigations into Monday's Sabasaba protest. The minors will appear in court on 15th July 2025, accompanied by their parents, while the remaining suspects are expected back in court on 17th July 2025. They were arrested on suspicion of participating in an unlawful assembly and malicious damage to property. In Eldoret, 36 suspects faced charges of going armed in public. They appeared before Senior Principal Magistrate Mukabi Kimane and were released on a 50,000 bond, each with a surety of a similar amount, or 10,000 shillings cash bail. The case will be mentioned on 21st July. In Narok, resident magistrate George Segero released 24 suspects accused of obstructing traffic, fomenting riots during Sabasaba Day within Majengo area, Narok town. Each was granted a personal bond of 20,000 shillings and a surety of a similar amount or 5,000 cash bail. And in Naivasha, Sub-County Police Commander Anthony Keter confirmed that 67 people had been arrested and arraigned, with police seeking more suspects. Ode Francis, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
And as we continue to analyze the aftermath of the deadly Sabasaba Day protests, we're still here with Martha Karua, who is the party leader of the People's Liberation Party. Martha, maybe as we look forward, maybe it's to try and understand where we are now. Why is there so much anger in the country, do you think, especially amongst the youth?
Bad governance. When the economy continues to slide, when services are almost grinding to a halt, and when citizens complain or show displeasure, the government responds with a heavy hand, with a breakdown in rule of law orchestrated by the government of the day, introducing militias, because I will not call them goons. It is state-backed militias, Haiti-like, state-like backed militias, to assault, to loot, to ban, and then charge the very youth who are holding peaceful protests with the banning and looting, which has been done by goons under cover of police, because we've seen them working hand in hand. That only increases the anger. Instead of listening to the citizens, is presiding over matters of state with high-handedness and with complete disregard of the rights of the people. I think this regime is tone deaf. The people cannot be contained through unlawful means. It is by only listening and responding to their complaints. And I keep on saying that al-Bashir's Sudan was a police state. He had a very strong military and security apparatus. He still fell. In Egypt, there was also a military and police state. And we still remember Tahrir Square, and it fell. We remember in China, Tiananmen Square happened. Even Adolf Hitler fell. No dictator has ever conquered the will of the people. It is a time of when, not if. So the message to this regime is very clear. Listen to the will of the people to stem bloodshed and destruction. And do not think that bringing armed militias and blaming it on the people, you're going to hoodwink anyone. And to our security forces, to anybody in authority, remember this is your country too. You will account personally. Any illegal orders, remember, you will account personally, and very soon.
The young people are saying, you know, Ruto must go. That's what they chant when they're out on the street, even online. What do you say, Martha?
Indeed, he must go if he cannot govern in accordance with the law. The people have the power to tell him to go. Let him read Article 1. There is no offense, no law broken by people chanting or demanding that he should go. They're demanding not just for his resignation, it's him and his entire complement, the entire government. And if they continue being tone deaf, it will happen sooner than later.
He says, you know, how do I go?
By resigning, or you'll be pushed out eventually by the people, by the will of the people. The acts that are happening today actually make it untenable for him to remain in power. And I keep on saying, being elected is not a title deed, which you wave in our faces. You have a term, but that term can be withdrawn. He also knows he employs people. in his home and in businesses. You can terminate them even where you have a contract. You can be terminated. And he should consider that he was actually fired last year during the Gen Z protests. So if you are on borrowed time, you try to correct your mistakes. He's adding insult to injury. It is a time, my call is for all Kenyans of goodwill. This is our country. And I have heard William Ruto's utterance that if there is no Kenya for Ruto, there will be no Kenya. So this is a deliberate attempt to cause civil strife in this country. We must resist, and all Kenyans of goodwill must come together to save this country, not in a dialogue with somebody deliberately breaking the law, with a group of ruling elite who are hell-bent on persecuting citizens. But all Kenyans of goodwill must come together to put in place measures that will stop this rogue government in its tracks.
One of the things that the president says is if you want him out, you meet him at the ballot in 2027 as one of the ways perhaps to make that determination on whether he continues as president or not. But we're not even ready with IEBC, Ms. Karua, and we know where that matter is, and without litigating it, because that matter is now in court. But, you know, what are your reflections on where we go with that? Because even with the electoral process, we are not ready with that right now. What are your thoughts on where we are with
Let me say
reconstituting that?
If he wants us to meet him on the ballot, change your ways, Dr. Ruto, you and your illegitimate rogue regime. If not, Kenyans have the power to terminate your contract earlier. As for IEBC, Dr. William Ruto deliberately and illegally pushed out commissioners whose tenure would still have been valid, because it is not right that all commissioners go at the same time and we are left without IEBC. That's why there was a broken down hiring. Having pushed them out illegally, he has delayed the process. If you remember, the NADCO report, which I didn't agree with, they took 1 year discussing. They have taken more than a year to pass the legislation in Parliament. And now the commissioners are yet to be appointed properly, because he appointed them against court orders. So it is deliberate. I am looking at the actions of Dr. William Ruto, and I'm seeing a man ready not to go to elections. So first, he denies the country an IEBC. Secondly, you can see everything he's doing is a man who thinks he has bought a title deed to State House. Why would he even build a church there? Who tells him that the next person who comes there will be interested? And this nonsense of lying to us that there was a Mabati church, I used to visit that State House. Unless if you're saying him and Uhuru constructed a Mabati church, and I doubt, he is the first person to ever construct a church in State House. This is a person treating the seat of government, and in particular State House, as personal property. This is not a person preparing to go. Kenyans, tighten your belts. We are off for a very rough ride. And I'll repeat, Kenyans of goodwill must stand together to find solutions. And this is not by dialoguing with a person who is shedding blood daily. That's not a person to dialogue with.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we want to know what the way out looks like in your view, and on a number of other issues, including police reforms, because that's under the spotlight right now with the conduct of police that we are seeing in the country during protests. So we'll talk a lot more about that. Where we go from here, what is the way out? And you've said dialogue isn't the way. So what is the way? And we do a lot of talking in this country, Martha. We talk quite a bit, and it costs us quite a few millions to talk. Is that the way forward? Do we talk ourselves out of this crisis? We're back In a moment, with Ms. Martha Karua, who is the PLP party leader, taking a look at the aftermath of the deadly Sabah Sabah Day protest. But first, we'll have the day's business news for you, and then we will carry on with our conversation right here on The Explainer when we return. JKIA expansion on course. Government says they expect to break ground before the end of the year.